Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am the Darklight Emissary, and this episode continues our series on the Legion tactics and doctrines of the Great Crusade era legions. And this episode is on the 10th Legion, the Iron Hands Legion. Now, this legion, if you talk to any fans of the Iron Hands within the community, is often a little bit disappointed by this legion not being fleshed out too much. There isn't a lot known about them during the Great Crusade. There's only a few short stories given to us about Varus Manus, their Primarch, as well as the Iron Hands as a Great Crusade legion. We don't really get to see much in the way of compliance action. There's really only a few background things that kind of indicate what they were like. However, a lot of their attitude can be gleaned from this, and a lot of what they could do can be speculated on here still in this video, versus for sure doctrinal what actually occurred being the case. As far as numbers go for the Iron Hands Legion, not too much is terribly known about this. I did find one source claiming that they are right at about 113,000 Marines before the drop site massacre, but again, nothing really clearly talks about them. But like all the legions, they were still a fairly big legion, and they could definitely hold their own in most conflicts. One of the most resounding traits of the Iron Hands Legion is that they tended to believe greatly in cybernetic replacement of their limbs. They tended to view the flesh as very weak, and so you could find augmentics on most of their troops. And along with this propensity was a direct relationship with the Mechanicum that some found a bit too close. And so within this legion was definitely more of a reverence for tech marines, especially, and a use of technology sometimes bordering upon to a techno-heresy level. They often had some toys and things that most other legions did not have due to their relationship with the Titan legions and the Mechanicum specifically, especially during the era of the Great Crusade. And their mode of war was often a very straightforward and impatient one. This legion was often called upon to take down enemy worlds that had some vestige of old night in the dark age of human technology that preceded it. And if you know anything about the dark age of technology, usually anything from that era is incredibly deadly and incredibly powerful. And so it says a lot about this legion that they were the ones picked often to defeat any forces still wielding any vestige of that lost age of human history. Going along with this propensity for loving the machine, this legion most likely had a higher amount of dreadnoughts that they probably also praised to a great degree, and they also probably had many more armored options than some of their brother legions. Now, most of their tactics involved direct frontal shock troop assaults, and one of the other main values of this legion was that it was often kind of considered a experienced legion in terms of how long they were with their Primarch, and Varus himself was often, seen as kind of a mentor to his brother Primarchs because he had been around longer than many of the other Primarchs during the Great Crusade. And so this legion was often split into stronger, more senior factions that would go help different other compliance fleets, different other expeditionary fleets, helping them as shock troops, as advisors, things like that. However, what is known is over the course of the Great Crusade, this legion started getting more impatient with some of their brother legions' tactics and strategies. This legion was not one you sent if you wanted a world to stay intact. The Iron 10th was a highly uncompromising legion as far as personality goes. If you sent them to attack a target, they would render it completely incapable of fighting back, and probably to a complete obliteration level. In some ways, the Iron Hands are sort of like the Iron Warriors Legion, and we'll talk more about the Iron Warriors. One thing I will say that's a main difference between them is that Perturabo kind of saw his men as expendable. I don't view Ferrus Manus as seeing his men as expendable, and the Iron Tenth had a healthy relationship in some regards with their Primarch. Ferrus Manus was very uncompromising to his men and what he expected out of them, but he would not just spend their lives needlessly and with any kind of spite. He didn't hate his men. And as far as Legion structure went, it was pretty much a complete autocracy with Ferrus at the top, some advisors in his personal cadre, and then, direct orders throughout the rest of his legion to his captains and squad leaders. There was no talking back or advising different to this Primarch. So they were very rigid in the way they fought, and it's noted that Ferrus saw the Legion as an extension of his body in a lot of ways. So this Legion typically followed their Primarch to the letter and were very loyal to their Primarch with not much questioning of what he was ordering them to do at any given point, which came to a head in a very specific way at the drop site massacre later that saw this Legion almost completely destroyed. But we are not talking about that era. If you want to learn more about the drop site massacre, there is a full video under the Primarchs playlist that talks about the Iron Hands and their full history up into the 41st millennium. As far as weapons of war that the Iron Hands preferred, along with a healthy propensity for dreadnoughts and armored units, they also seem to really like Terminator armor. Like all the legions, they did have their own specialized Terminators known as Morlocks in the first company that tended to follow Ferrus Manus around specifically, and all things point to that specific cadre of Terminators being an absolutely vicious lot to ever have to deal with. There were also Terminators called Gorgons, which were it was called Gorgon pattern Terminator armor. And along with their propensity for technological acumen, they augmented these specific Terminator suits to bond more closely with their user. So these ones were more cybernetic in nature and possibly had faster response times and things like that would possibly make these more effective suits of armor. And in general, that kind of goes to a lot of the different armored and machine things that the Iron Hands Legion tended to deploy, because there was things about the Iron Hands that just other legions did not have, and a lot of that has to do with their relationship with the Mechanicum. And then, along with the Mechanicum forces that they had great relationships with, that means this legion also augmented their forces with many squadrons of battle automata. So, you had great maniples of machine, basically robot armies, also fighting alongside the Iron Hands Legionnaires themselves. So that would multiply their relative lower number of Space Marines with a redundant army of basically meat shields made up of machines, which could just be replaced and repaired afterwards without really losing the full machine, I'd imagine. So you have a lot of built-in redundancy with this Legion and durability. Many of their troops have augmetic limbs, so, that gets destroyed, just replace it. If they have a leg taken off or an arm taken off, most Space Marines are going to shrug that off to begin with. But if it's not even their actual limb to begin with, then I'm sure that they have built-in pain shutoff schemes and things like that. These Marines are going to shrug off even more when you fight them, unless you are somehow able to get a headshot on each one every time. So you can imagine the durability of this Legion in the middle of a great assault, and the enemy force they're fighting against doesn't understand this about this force at the time. This legion isn't exactly known for having any great examples of amazing in-orbit capabilities. However, being a Space Marine Legion, they still had a somewhat powerful fleet with at least one Gloriana ship that Ferrus Manus commanded. So, like all the Gloriana class battleships, each one of them is a formidable, powerful powerhouse. I do remember in the book Fulgrim that mostly followed Fulgrim, but had a lot of Ferrus Manus in it due to the events of that book. When Fulgrim arrives at Ferrus Manus's capital ship, it's noted that, forges ringing out and things like that were the noises that you heard among Ferrus Manus's capital ship, amongst his flagship. So I could imagine that his fleet and his ships were augmented more towards very powerful supporting roles, where they had more forges and places for their tech marines to create and augment weaponry, more so than possibly nearly any of the other Space Marine legions of the day. Interestingly enough, this is one of the only legions that really frowned upon fighting alongside unaugmented human forces like the Imperial main army. Most expeditionary fleets had large supporting armies of regular human troops, and the Iron Hands almost completely forwent that. They tended to view regular humans in a very not liked light, because regular humans were, too weak in their eyes, basically, to fight the battles that they wanted to fight. And this wasn't exactly true, but it was something that the Iron Hands were very stubborn about, and so that's why they often had Mechanicum forces instead, and even robots fighting alongside them. They just found regular humans too untrustworthy. And so this has been a bit about the Iron Hands Legion during the Great Crusade era, a bit of their tactics and strategies. As always, please leave a comment if you'd like to discuss this further or bring anything up. Leave a like if you'd like to as well. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. I'd love to see you again on another video. We're going to keep going here, adding some great content to the channel. There's already quite a few videos out, so if you have a subject you'd like to look at, take a look at what I've already done. There's a few theory videos, a more extensive history on each of these legions already. There's a few things out there. I appreciate all the time that each of you have chosen to spend here, even if you are not subscribed yet. I hope you are in the future. If you've been continuing to watch, I appreciate that. And so the next legion up that we're going to be talking about is going to be the 9th Legion, and that is the Blood Angels Legion. So that should be a fun one. The Blood Angels have a bit more to talk about than some of the other ones here so far. So as always, bring your light into the dark places, and I thank you for your time. Have a great day or night wherever you are, and we will talk soon. Thank you.